The screech of tires tore through the dawn like a gunshot, shattering the quiet of my rural retreat. I bolted upright in bed, heart hammering, as the crunch of gravel and a sickening thud echoed from the side yard. Throwing on a flannel shirt, I stumbled to the window just in time to see a dusty gray SUV lurch to a stop, its front wheels sinking into the wildflower patch my grandfather had spent decades nurturing. A woman in a bright red tracksuit leapt out, her oversized sunglasses glinting in the early light. She waved at me with the confidence of someone who owned the place and shouted, "Don't worry, this is fine, I'll handle it." I stood frozen, a half-eaten bagel dangling from my hand, staring at the wreckage of what used to be a butterfly haven. That was the moment I knew this was war. My name's Ethan Caldwell, and I'd only been living in my grandfather Tom's old farmhouse for 5 months. It sat on the edge of Pine Hollow, a prim little neighborhood with manicured lawns and an HOA that acted like it ruled a small kingdom. Grandpa Tom left me everything: 6 acres of fields, a weathered barn, and a scruffy lot next to the house I'd planned to turn into a woodworking shop someday. For now, it was a meadow of tall grass, dotted with daisies and the quirky ceramic frogs Tom swore kept rabbits at bay. The neighbors seemed harmless at first, all khaki shorts and power wash driveways, but then I met Sandra. Sandra Wheeler, the HOA president, showed up on my doorstep a week after I moved in, clutching a gift basket that reeked of lavender and superiority. Her smile was all teeth, her voice syrupy as she welcomed me, saying she was thrilled a proper owner had finally replaced Tom. I nodded, wary of her mention of neighborhood standards, and shut the door the moment she left. At first, her presence was just a nuisance: flyers about lawn height regulations, tips on approved mailbox colors, a snide note about lot uniformity. But then the cars started appearing. It began subtly. A sedan idling on my lot during a Saturday barbecue down the street. A pickup parked half on my grass the next weekend. At first, I chalked it up to lost drivers or bad turns, but then I found tire ruts slicing through the meadow and a crumpled burger wrapper tangled in the brush. I caught the next culprit, a guy in a polo shirt balancing a tray of brownies. Sandra said this is the overflow lot, he mumbled, barely looking up. I told him it was private property. He shrugged, muttered something about checking with Sandra, and shuffled off. That evening, I found a sign stabbed into my lot. HOA guest parking temporary. It was scrawled in marker, with a lopsided heart in the corner. I ripped it out and tossed it in the trash. By noon the next day, another appeared, this time laminated and tied to a stake. I was stunned. It was like Sandra was playing a game of escalation, and I was the unwilling opponent. I marched to her house, a pristine colonial with a flagpole and perfectly trimmed hedges, and confronted her. She smiled, unfazed. "It's just practical, Ethan. You're not using the land. It keeps the streets clear. Think of it as a community service." I told her it was my property, not a public lot. She suggested a shared usage agreement. I walked away before I said something I'd regret. The invasions grew bolder. Cars parked inches from my fence. A family used my grass as a picnic spot, leaving diaper wipes behind. One morning, I found an oil stain seeping into the roots of Tom's prized milkweed, the only plant monarch butterflies still visited. Fury burned through me. I stormed back to Sandra's, banging on her door. She answered in a floral apron, her expression mock surprise. "Let's not make this about territory," she sighed. "This is about cooperation." I couldn't speak, choked by rage, and left without another word. That night, over a beer and a legal pad, I plotted revenge. I wasn't just fighting for my land, I was fighting for Tom's legacy, for the quiet he'd cherished. I dove into research, pulling county records and zoning laws. The lot was mine, free of HOA control, with no easements or shared rights. Satellite maps confirmed it, and I pinned them to a board like a detective hunting a lead. Then I hit the hardware store, a gritty outpost that smelled of sawdust and motor oil. I loaded my truck with trail cams, motion lights, no trespassing signs, and a secret weapon, pressure-sensitive spike strips, the kind used for security perimeters. For 2 days, I worked like a man possessed. I buried the spike strips under turf, wired the cams to my phone, and angled the lights to blaze like a stadium. I tested it with a wheelbarrow. The spikes popped up with a hiss that made me grin. By midnight, my lot was a fortress. I fell asleep, imagining Sandra's face when her first victim rolled in. At 7:45 a.m., a black Jeep pulled onto the lot, its driver oblivious. The wheels sank into the turf, and a sharp hiss followed. A man in a golf shirt jumped out, cursing as his tire deflated. He danced around, phone in hand, like the ground was molten. I sipped my coffee, watching the trail cam feed like it was a blockbuster. Half an hour later, Sandra arrived, her green blazer flapping as she stormed across the lot. She didn't look shocked, just livid, as if reality had betrayed her personally. I stepped outside, cup in hand, and she jabbed a finger at me. "What did you do?" she demanded. I feigned innocence. "Protected my property. It's not a parking lot." She claimed I couldn't set traps on community land. I pointed to my signs, discreet but legal, warning of spikes and surveillance. She spotted one, shrieked, and noticed the QR code linking to a folder I dubbed Sandra's Parking Saga. Her face went crimson. "I'll report you," she spat. I smiled. "Please do. I've got footage." She dragged the Jeep's driver into a whispered argument, her hands flailing. A tow truck came, and she tried to block my cams, but every frame was saved. That afternoon, an envelope slid under my Duran HOA fine for $1,000, citing unsafe conditions and disrupting harmony. Ilåg till me sidesashit. The HOA had no power over me, and Sandra knew it. I sent the letter to my lawyer friend, Mia, who called it a desperate bluff and urged me to keep every scrap of evidence. I doubled down. Back at the store, I grabbed more spike strips and upgraded my cams with voice intercoms. That night, I added a pre-recorded warning. "You are trespassing. Exit now. This area is monitored." At 10 p.m., a van crept in, its driver laying cardboard over the spikes. I hit the intercom, and the guy jumped like he'd been tossed, sprinting back to his van and peeling out, toppling one of Sandra's signs. I saved the clip as Cardboard Bandit. Sandra taped another fine to my door, $2,000 for hostile behavior and psychological distress. Mia laughed it off as legal fan fiction and confirmed my lot zoning excluded HOA oversight. The neighborhood started to notice. Cars slowed as they passed. A retiree named Carl gave me a nod, muttering, "She's had it coming." I added floodlights, rigged to blaze if anyone crossed the line. My lot wasn't just security, it was a warning. For nights later, my cams caught two figures sneaking across the lot, one with a flashlight, the other hauling plywood. They were covering the spikes, trying to disable my setup. I hit the speaker. "Trespassing reported." Smile for the police. They dropped the wood and bolted. I zoomed in on was Sandra's cousin, Lisa, a smug regular at HOA meetings. I saved the footage as Midnight Saboteurs and backed it up thrice. The next day, I hit the county office, pulling every record on my land. The clerk handed over maps and a zoning exclusion proving Tom's lot was never HOA turf. A clause banned the HOA from claiming adjacent properties without consent. I drafted a cease and desist letter, citing laws and threatening lawsuits, and mailed copies to Sandra, the HOA board, and the sheriff. Hours later, Sandra slapped another notice on my door, accusing me of visual terrorism and excessive lighting. Mia called it pathetic. Then Carl stopped by, a quiet widower who'd known Tom. Over coffee, he spilled the dirt. Sandra had seized the HOA presidency after the last leader quit, ruling like a dictator. She'd fined people for unmatching curtains and banned a kid's kite flying for airspace violations. Carl said most neighbors despised her, but feared her wrath. "You're giving them hope," he said. I grinned. "Good." The next morning, my cams caught Sandra herself, hammering a sign into my lot. HOA Event Parking Code 4.1. She posed like a conqueror. I recorded it, removed her sign, and replaced it with a steel-mounted warning. Trespassing is a crime. Violators prosecuted. That night, I edited a highlight real Sandra signs, Lisa's sabotage, the fake fines, and titled it The Fall of Sandra Wheeler. I shared it with Mia and Carl, who called it Oscar-worthy. Mia emailed a bombshell, a notarized county letter confirming my lot's independence. I took it to the HOA's next meeting, unannounced. Sandra, in a pink suit, faltered as I handed out copies and played the sign planning video. The board, Carl, a tired woman named Ellen, and two others read the zoning proof. Ellen spoke first. "This is serious." Sandra overreached. I added, "She's trespassed, lied, and exposed you to lawsuits." Carl moved to investigate her. Ellen seconded. The vote passed 4-1, Sandra dissenting. She stood, silent, as the meeting moved on. 2 days later, Sandra paced my lot's edge, whispering into her phone. I caught fragments. "He can't when there's a way." She looked desperate, a general without an army. Then a code officer arrived, citing illegal spikes. I showed him my records and footage. He closed the case, chuckling, "Nice cams." The county hit Sandra with a citation for property misuse and launched an HOA fraud probe. Carl brought beers, saying the board ousted her and set term limits. "You did it," he said. I toasted him. "We did." I replaced the spikes with a garden wildflowers, stone paths, benches. The cam stayed, a silent guard. A developer, Nate, offered to buy the lot for a vacation cabin, inspired by my saga's online buzz. I sold, stipulating no HOA ties. By summer, a cedar cottage stood where Sandra's minions once parked. Guests loved the paths, unaware of the war they walked on. Sandra drove, passed once, her face blank, hands tight on the wheel. I trimmed my hedge and let her stew. The HOA's new leader scrapped her rules. Kids drew chalk murals, flamingos sprouted on lawns. I kept the cams rolling and a sign warning. Trespassers will be viral. The land was mine again, peaceful, private, and proof that silence isn't surrender. Sandra watched her kingdom crumble, and I was just getting started. If you were the one in this story, how would you react? Would you stand up and fight back, or accept the unreasonable pressure and control from the HOA? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this VY Deo with more people. Your small action gives us the motivation to keep bringing you more intense and engaging stories. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next VY Deo.